Welcome back to AI After Hours, presented by AZTRA. I'm Sean Fleming, your host. Last episode, we kicked off the manufacturing arc with Dovient. Happy to have Shashank back with us. Most of the time we spent on maintenance, tribal knowledge that's kind of stuck in people's heads, FEMA, variants, fishbone, quality things, everything on the quality engineering side. Just getting AI into a plant that's still running on Modbus and machines that is honestly older than I am. So if you missed it, go back, listen to that first one. Today's going to pick off right where that left off. And the thing I kept coming back to after we recorded that one is everything we talked about was really upstream of a bigger decision. Whether a machine is healthy is kind of just a question about whether it's available. And availability is really just an input into the real problem, which is capacity. So that's where we're going to spend more time today. Capacity is the thing that production planning has to wrestle with every single day. Lead time, suppliers, inventory, that's the part no one really puts on a dashboard. And that's the working capital you've got tied up because of how you planned 3 months ago. That lag is the whole game in manufacturing. Similar thing in retail. You make a bad call on demand and you usually know in a couple of days. However, on a shop floor, a bad planning decision can just sit there quiet for a quarter. It shows up later in the warehouse after all the lead times of manufacturing, and it's full of wrong inventory, a shipment you missed, capacity burned with the wrong SKU. So last episode was about seeing the signal, and today's about what we actually do with it. So without further ado, let's introduce the team we have. As I mentioned, we have Shashank back, founder of Dovient. Really happy to have you back to close out this episode for our 2-episode manufacturing arc. Last time, you really turned the theory into something real for us, and digging into planning is kind of where we want to go today. Harsha's back again as well. Harsha's a lead AI architect at AZTRA. Harsha last time went deep on the knowledge graph side, turning messy shift notes into something a system can actually use. And today we're looking for kind of more of the planning version of that. Which signals actually move a production signal, uh, a production schedule, and what changes under the hood when the system stops just watching the floor and starts deciding what to build next. Varun's back with us. Varun missed the last episode. He was busy earning his executive MBA. We definitely missed you last time, Varun. I
Mr.
think it's
Director.
really, yeah, I think it's really timely that you're back as well, so that we can talk more about service level versus working capital, flexibility versus costs, calls that get made in a boardroom, not on the floor. Varun, hopefully you can add that perspective. So, without further ado, we'll get started with Shashank. But before we dive into it, I just wanted to go around and see any meaningful updates from anyone since we last recorded. I know me personally, I was in Ireland on a trip for a friend's wedding, so this episode is taking a little bit longer to get out than I think we originally planned, partly due to my travel schedule. But any other kind of relevant updates in your personal life or professionally that anyone wanted to share before we get into the questions? Business as usual, it sounds like.
Harsha has to talk about his married life. He's a newly married guy on the block.
Yeah, later, Varun. We should not talk about it on air. So,
Yeah, we're learning. It's hard to get a hold of Harsha sometimes on U.S. time on Fridays because that's date night. So we're trying to we're trying to work around that. Um, Congratulations, Harsha, on that. But yeah, let's go to Shashank. So Shashank, last episode, like I said, we were more on the signal side of maintenance, trying to capture tribal knowledge, getting signals from the machines, quality analysis. So let's walk up one step in the chain into production and inventory. Maintenance tells you whether a machine is available, right? But when planning has to take that and actually turn it into a schedule that ships product, it changes a little bit. So I guess my question to you is, say a plant got everything we talked about last time right. The knowledge was captured, the signals are clean, plans are dynamic. What does that mean now for production and inventory decisions? Are there still ways those can break? Just curious your perspective on that.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that we did start with the maintenance. It has to be the other way around, to be honest. Um, so nowadays I'm meeting entrepreneurs who are actually just getting started. Um, is it okay? Can I take just a small break? Someone actually is trying to.
Yeah, all good.
Moment.
All good. Sounds like someone's maybe giving him a delivery at his door right now. Maybe we should start telling our guests to print out a podcast recording in progress sign and put it on their door.
We get deliveries in the middle of the night in India, which is beautiful. You know,
Yeah.
you get orders of Swiggy and
I see.
Zomato delivering
My
food.
daughter is
Oh.
not aware. She's constantly distracting me. Yeah. So coming
good.
back to where we were discussing. So I'm meeting some entrepreneurs who are just getting started with their operations. They're starting from a clean slate. When you start from a clean slate, maintenance is not the first thing that you usually look at, right? So what you usually plan is efficiency and the process itself, where you get all your raw materials, and from where you get your raw materials, how you manage your inventory, how do you select your suppliers, how do you establish that process to produce the output from these raw materials. So all that thought goes in, and maintenance kicks in once you have, like rightly you said, once you all figure that out, once say 1 year 2 years down the line. So then you get into maintenance, problem fixing, and of course making sure the operations are smooth. But it's very interesting, and I think this takes the front seat. What we are speaking today about production and inventory. That's where even the AI adoption, the tools adoption, or the technology what we're trying to speak now is more meaningfully applied, and where companies are actually ahead of the technology curve there in these areas.
So I want to layer on a question to that, because it sounds like you have the plan, right? But then
Yeah,
if something goes wrong with the machines, unplanned downtime, things like that, you need to have
correct.
the backup plan for the plan. So I guess as it relates to the backup plan for the plan, if we kind of do a good job on the the last episode of what we talked about, you're kind of minimizing the chance that you have to enable that backup plan, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So ideal plant is something which goes according to the plan, which never happens, right? So there are always surprises. So you have, if you take a plastic injection molding unit, so which is getting all the material from different plastic sources, and you're trying to produce your plastic bottles, suppose say. So in that case, there is a lot of variation in raw material, variation in the process, variation in the parameters. So there are surprises every day. So on how do you plan for that surprises to make sure that you have good conformity ratio, you're producing your products well, and stay in the competition with the efficiency. So that is the crux of it. Um, Well, having a backup plan is definitely essential, and that backup plan also has to be agile. So,
Right.
whatever we speak, that agility, the lean is what manufacturing industries are today looking at. So, with minimal capital, with minimal inventory, being very efficient. So, how do I produce the maximum bottom line? So, that is what these plans always optimize for.
Yeah, and I know I had mentioned the example of like the backup plan specific to unplanned downtime of the machine, but I think there's another version of that backup plan too, which is suppliers are constrained on the materials available to actually run the machines to create the output. I think given a lot of global crisis that's relevant right now, I imagine manufacturers are facing a lot of that, right? Where I think what we had discussed last time around having that tribal knowledge to maybe have other teams work on machines that they haven't historically, because that's the machine that can run given the supply you have at that time, also becomes important as it relates to a backup plan of supplier constraints.
Yeah. So having, I think you're mentioning having a backup for backup plan.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind
Cool.
of moving in circles. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that I think that's a great setup for kind of the nature of kind of all that we're going to talk about today. So Harsha, I'm gonna point a question at you now. Like I had said in the intro, last time we dove really deep in the quality engineering side, knowledge graphs. What does a production version of that look like from a systems side? From like what teams are leveraging to do this, and how can what we talked about last time potentially be used to enrich those other systems that are completely different that are used on the planning side? I'm interested your perspective on that and the impact it may have on lead times, capacity utilization, shifts in mid cycle to a different machine or output, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think I think Sean, there are broadly four systems, right? And if you think of planning, there is a plan is not a single point in time plan, right? You will have a long range plan, which is essentially you plan for your capacity. Then you will basically have your requirement planning or network planning, where you actually plan for where to produce, how much to produce, and things like that. Then you obviously have your detailed planning, where actually your PPDS or production detailed scheduling happens. And then you have execution level planning. So this is where the shop floor managers, day in day out, they keep changing the schedule on the fly, looking at shop floor constraints, right? So a lot of things kind of in the planning, the way where we are at the stage of planning will define, like basically where will define what systems to use and what type of technology, what type of tech stack to use, and things like that, right? For example, for like we have systems for material requirement planning. So it tells you how much material to source from where, how much raw material to source from where to produce certain number of finished goods. So this is if you have a high level finished good plan, it will basically convert that into a raw material plan. It will tell you how much it is. But if you just use that plan as a if you just use that plan as it is without actually overlaying any intelligence on top of it, it will always be an issue, because you can always have shocks, right? Like you guys were saying that earlier as well, supplier might not supply on time, or let's say you might you might see more demand, right? You might actually see more demand on the fly when execution is actually happening, and things like that. Or it could be another case where, let's say, it could be another case where let's say you have some issue where with some supplier location, or let's say some shipping route has stopped, and things like this. So there could be a lot of these scenarios that will obviously impact your material requirement plan. So when we are basically planning, one thing that is important is essentially these base systems, whether it is a production planning system, whether it is a material requirement planning system. These don't really account for these external shocks or factors, or let's say any variability that comes outside the system. Like essentially, all of these are like optimization systems, right? They will do an optimization, a bounded scope optimization, and they'll give you an output. But anything that varies out of that optimization scope is something that they can't model for. There was like an interesting example that with one of the clients when we implemented is basically this was during COVID. Essentially, for one of the FMCG clients, they had an interesting problem that they were producing basically material. They were producing certain finished goods, or they were producing some certain products in a plant, and obviously the plant got shut down because of COVID. Now they need to know alternative sourcing units for it. So where else do I need to source this plant from? And there is no system like that that tells this, because the problem that exists is every plant has its own system, every plant has its own nomenclature for raw material, every plant has its own nomenclature for a finished good as well, right? Now if a similar finished good, can it be produced from a different plant? If it's a simple answer, a simple question like this can't be answered through the existing systems. And that is where you need a lot of intelligence overlay on top of these base systems, right? Resolving nomenclatures, resolving taxonomies. You need to be able to gather external intelligence, whether it is the competition, whether it is basically shipping intelligence around shipping routes, whether it is intelligence around what is happening in the market. Like let's say, how is are there any labor laws that are going to impact your production, whether it's in the short term or long term, and things like this. So all of these overlays, I feel, are something that is kind of missing in production planning completely today. And even though the systems do some basic planning work, And because this overlay doesn't exist, lot of times what happens is these shop floor managers end up doing last minute adjustments to their plan, and that will basically cause a lot of your issues in your this thing, right? Because you can't just do a lot, like all of this is a bullwhip, right? Any last minute adjustment you do, it will basically have a repercussion downstream which will be bigger. So you can't keep just doing these last minute adjustments. You will have to be a little bit more aware about your external market. You will have to also kind of be connected in the network in some way. What are all the plans available? What are all the vendors available? You have to connect. You have to in some way connect this into a seamless network. You have to be able to standardize it and navigate through this to actually get to like an integrated view and then plan accordingly.
That was great background and context. I think you gave, the systems view of the business case for why you need to be agile, like Shashank was
Yeah,
saying, right? Like all of these different factors have downstream effects. There's, potential data integration issues or data lineage issues of coordinating and integrating the different systems. So yeah, no, I think that was perfect. To me, I was thinking about it a little bit from a sales perspective as well, right? Like where it's like we talked about supplier impact, we talked about unplanned downtime impact, and you had mentioned something in what you were saying too about demand, right? Which is, oh well, what if the sales team now starts selling something that
yeah, exactly.
previously
Yeah,
wasn't sold as much, and you got to pivot, or Varun and I were on a conversation not too long ago with a manufacturing client, and they had mentioned to us that they had to actually go back to their customers and say, hey, we can only fulfill X amount of this product, like this is your cap, we have to institute a cap because of our supplier constraint, which then also changes the way the sales reps are going to go out and approach demand and try to sell different things. And I think, yeah, agile, dynamic, however you want to say it, things
yeah,
never seem to stop except the machines during unplanned downtime in manufacturing. So you gotta really stay on your toes. And I think Shashank said it well early on, is that all of this is kind of at the forefront of what people are concerned about. And then the latter half is what we had talked about in the first episode, is trying to make it as efficient as possible and make the team as upskilled as possible to handle machines through that knowledge capture. So I think this has been a really really great setup so far of capacity planning and demand in general of manufacturing. Varun, let's get a question to you in here. Curious your perspective on this. So a lot of what we're talking about so far, I think that Shashank and Harsha have laid out really well, is more on the operations side. I am curious, how does this then go roll up to decisions that are being made in a boardroom? I think a lot of times when we think about, especially when Harsha was describing the problem as well as he did, a lot of times these decisions in a boardroom are being made on, maybe it's like a war room type atmosphere where there's a bunch of data calls and everyone's trying to make sense of what they have, and maybe the numbers don't add up, but you got to make a call at the end of the day to keep stuff moving forward. What's your perspective on how a leadership team should be framing these calls, and what can keep them to be more disciplined and not just kind of going off their gut if they don't have all the answers right away?
Yeah. So I would like to reframe this a little bit differently,
Sure.
like, because you framed it versus, like, in terms of service levels against inventory cost and flexibility, working capital, all of these things, right? It is this is actually a core problem. Like, this classic problem of every industry, right? But the real problem underneath that is, nobody in the room has agreed on how much uncertainty they want to carry. You know, because supply chain is not about it's a promise. It's more of an uncertainty problem that we're talking about here. What is the uncertainty that you are willing to carry in your business?
Your tolerance level.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. That's how I see. Now, in terms of a debate of service levels versus inventory cost, or how that financial trade-offs happens, it is not, you're bidding, you have to make a bet against your uncertainty. It's not about the planning tools that you have in the market, or it is not about the the discipline that doesn't carry across the different teams. But what really worked in most of the teams is the discipline of you're agreeing to one, your CEO and CFO working on one single trade-off. Hey, this is our uncertainty budget. This is what our tolerance level is. You know, that is where your actual discipline comes into picture. And okay, I am ready to take this bet on my uncertainty. I'm ready to do that. And most companies think through that, but what falls to the cracks is when they pass it to the downstreams, they miss that visibility into that. You make a decision at the top level. Hey, this is my budget to my to my tolerance levels or uncertainty that you speak of, right? How exactly can I get to that? Your salesperson doesn't understand that. He talks in terms of, okay, I'm keeping a buffer for my inventory, but that's a margin erosion by itself,
Right.
right? And that's a trust issue um, in terms of the customer. Or like Harsha says, like forecasting or planning is not a one single number. You cannot just say that this is accurate. So you have to bake that all of these trade-offs into your into your financial markdowns. And the leadership has to be at a level that, hey, this is absolutely our tolerance level. We cannot go beyond that.
Yeah.
Because
So
look at the market right now. How uncertain that is. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. The oil prices go shooting up. The trade market is with all, and then the supply chain for AI is shooting up. The demand. There's tons of things happening. Has anyone predicted any of those things? Maybe yes or no.
yeah. And every time you get a post on Truth Social about where the state of that agreement is at, the stock market goes up or down
Yeah,
in
exactly.
response, right? So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I think you're describing it well, that especially when you're a leader at a publicly traded company and you're beholden to shareholders, there's a lot of things that may change your tolerance level
Right, right,
quickly. And
right.
yeah, I think you
And that's
described it well, of like it's never going to be perfect, but like what is good enough for
yeah,
you?
like Harsha has mentioned, right? You got to be more agile in terms of that. You got to be more susceptible to the change. You got to be more, you know, understand. Okay, where do I spend? How do I contain my risk? How do I take a conservative approach here? I wouldn't tell a manufacturing executive to eliminate. You cannot eliminate that entire uncertainty.
Right.
And if someone, like, we are in the forecasting business of building the softwares, and if I am saying that my product gives you that 100% accurate forecasting, I'm like, I'm bullshitting that. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
I can be as accurate enough as possible with the data that I have in the market, and what your tolerance level and all of that are. I can be very close to that. But if I'm saying something like that, or if anyone else is saying that in the market, I'm like, I would run away from them.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, and I think in the past, Harsha's brought up to us like this concept of the frozen window in planning,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
I think that's important too, is like no matter how dynamic you are or your ability to be agile, your frozen window is kind of set in stone. And maybe in manufacturing it's a little different in retail, where that frozen window in manufacturing is we loaded up the line to run this production. We're going to lose more money if we stop the line. So we got to see it to its end and then make a decision from there, right? And Varun, I think something else you had brought up that I thought was interesting was, it sounded like even with the perfect system, you're always going to be having to make some type of call. And then also too, I think a lot of times as it relates to leaders, they may have a strategy in mind, or they may have a direction they want to take the company that isn't necessarily well understood at that point in time to the downstream of the organization, where they're trying to push everyone in one direction and they're making calls to get in that direction. And sometimes maybe that level of communication the leader has around that vision could help ease the minds of all the people that are then following the actions of the decision.
That's right. Yep. That's exactly how that goes. And like I said, that CEO, CFO has to be aligned in terms of how they want to approach that and how they want to take it to the rest of the team and agree upon that and put a strict guardrails around that. Like I said, you cannot eliminate uncertainty in your business, and you have to deal with that.
all you can do is minimize it. It sounds like,
Exactly.
and
Yep.
yeah, and that's
Mhm.
I like how you said, we're in the demand planning business, and Shashank has done an excellent job with Dovient on the manufacturing side. So I think that's largely why we're all here together today, right? Is
Right.
trying to explore how we can do both for the outcomes of clients to help them
Hmm.
minimize and get as close as possible and hopefully reduce that that
Uncertainty.
that threshold, yeah, that
Yeah.
threshold
Yeah.
of pain a little bit to improve margins. So, Shashank, one more question for you, and then we'll dive into the roundtable section where we can kind of just add our thoughts as a whole to individual questions. But before I go there, this is what I was curious to learn more about. So, say we get to the point like Varun was describing, right? We have a good planning tool. It's dynamic. We understand there's constraints. It'll never be perfect. We have an awesome downstream tool with Dovient as it relates to the signals from machines to minimize downtime and make the workforce more effective with knowledge capture. If all this is in place, maybe speak to the different levels we've described of like what does this do for a manufacturing plant? How does this change how they operate? What are the things teams can now focus on instead of firefighting all the time to help continuously improve kind of the bottom line of the organization?
Yeah. So manufacturing businesses, as you know, are very brutal in terms of margins. So it's always a margin pressure game. So it's always a competition between how efficient you are, right? If you take the largest auto manufacturing company like Maruti, which is delivering cars, and when you compare it to some other company where Maruti is able to beat others by tacket time, the amount of cars that they can produce on the line, um, how efficient they are in terms of giving the output. So it's a brutal business, and having this is not just something that's nice to have. So the initiatives that you spoke about, the ideal case, the saturation is not a nice to have. It's what all the manufacturing companies strive all the time. So once you are there, once you achieve it, right, you would get into a automation mode where you are not dependent on people. You are prone to resistant, or you are very resistant from a lot of external environmental factors that can operate on your business, and where you can give much more bottom line profits to your investors in the manufacturing company and have a smooth ride. So that is ideal case what these manufacturing cases are striving to. So once you are in that position, it's all about finding more business and scaling your plans. You replicate what you have, the saturation, what is working for you, in a different location, and produce the output. So it's how companies scale. Yeah. I don't know if
Yeah.
that answered your question directly,
No,
but
no, that's perfect. I think what you described is you move from a mode of constant firefighting, which is exhausting for everyone, into a mode of growth, which is ultimately the goal of manufacturing organizations. And I think that's a really great way to kind of bring it all together is when you get these things right, you get to focus on what the business intended to do, right? Serve as many customers as possible in the best way possible with the best output possible. And these systems and them working together seems to be critical to achieve that goal.
right.
Awesome. All right, cool. So I did have a list of roundtable questions that I want to go through, but this conversation reminded me of something from a previous role I had at NVIDIA where there was this big effort to do what they were calling a digital twin with Mercedes. So they were creating an entire digital twin of the manufacturing floor for Mercedes. This jogged my memory when you're talking about automotive, and they were kind of using that to stress or pressure test the different manufacturing lines and do kind of what if analysis of if this goes down, how do we pivot, how do we do these things. What is your all's perspective, and whoever wants to jump in first, go ahead, but what is your all's perspective on digital twins and the value of that as it relates to a manufacturing company, and what types of manufacturing companies are really ready to take on that level of a system?
Yeah, interesting. So I would take it first. Today morning, I visited a manufacturing company, where they're just setting up a metal powder manufacturing unit. So where it's a classic case of where we discussed about digital twin, the ability to get it. So the moment people speak about digital twin, they immediately jump on to imagine some large companies, some fancy companies that are there in the market and trying to sell a lot of costly technology to companies like small units, right? So these digital twin, shouldn't be misunderstood. It's a very loosely used term, to be honest. I know for a lot of people, digital twin mean different things. But digital twin for me is something simple, where you have at least the basic monitoring of the physical unit that is happening in place. So you have a mission that is physically running. You have your plant, which has a set of missions that is physically running. Are you able to exactly read all the data, sensors data, and have these metrics projected onto a virtual platform where you can see that unit? So that is the first stage of digital unit, I call it. So then through this digital unit, where you give the data back or where you operate the mission remotely is a separate thing. We should isolate both, is what I believe. So having the monitoring is the first step to get to the digital twin, which is really useful for a lot of companies.
Harsha Varun, any thoughts on digital twin?
I think
I would want to have a digital twin of myself.
Yeah, that'd be nice, right? Double your output.
Yeah. But Sean, is it okay if I can just spin it around?
Yeah, no, however you
You
see
know,
fit.
I would want to hear from Harsha and Shashank, from both of them, in terms of what made them build Dovient.
Shashank will do. So,
I think,
Go ahead, Shashank.
yeah, when we
I want to hear
visited,
from.
plants,
Sorry, what was that, Shashank?
yeah, when we visited, I think there is a small lag. So when we visited, pharmaceutical plants, we did notice that the busiest guy in the shop floor is a maintenance manager. So maintenance manager is always overburdened with a lot of interruptions in their regular work. So maintenance teams are actually the engineering teams. So they are supposed to be focusing on commissioning of uh, new plants, commissioning of new missions, and making sure that they run smoothly. But they are always lost in the regular operations, regular havoc that is created on the shop floor.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a problem where we were attracted to solve. So then we visited a lot of manufacturing companies, understood, this is some pain that needs to be solved immediately, and we took up that project and really learned quite a bit of the maintenance processes that go on shop floor and build
Okay.
Dovient.
Okay. Now I want to take a give a different take on what Sean wants to talk about Dovient, because I know Sean doesn't speak about his other side of the experience that he had from manufacturing industries and what he sold in the past. Sean, I really want your take on what you felt, why what made you excited, and what is that you see the gap in terms of industry to the product, and I want to hear your perspective on that today.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and it kind of relates to what Shashank was sharing about kind of the necessary input to create a digital unit, right? I think, early on in my career, I was working for a solar company, and I would taught myself Modbus, and I'd go into these different pieces of equipment on a solar site, and I'd try to get as much data out as humanly possible, so that I could determine, hey, what things can I look at, and what makes sense, so I can start to find issues either as they arise or before they arise, to help improve the overall production of the solar site, which helped the company because they made money based on production of solar. So I think what really excited me about Dovient was the ability to ingest all of that IoT data and kind of start to do, what Harsha talked about last episode with knowledge graphs of the interdependencies of these systems, and using that data to identify quality, potential quality defects, do predictive maintenance. I had another role where I was working at a manufacturing company that made all the soda machines for McDonald's, their automated beverage system. And that manufacturing line was rock solid. It was humming like no problem at all. But there was another newer line for a different soda that was trying to launch, and it had a lot of issues. And it was newer, so the issues hadn't really been stress tested until they were put in a real, commercial environment for the soda machines. And a lot of what came back to my plate was do testing in a lab to try to predict failure modes, bring that back to the manufacturing team who's deciding the build out process to try to do different quality checks to alleviate those issues. And I think had, that organization had more information as it relates to the different machines, how they're producing, or better data inputs from the humans doing the assembly component of that, they probably would have mitigated a lot of that ahead of the units actually being in the field and failing. And I think that's probably maybe one of the worst case scenarios you could have as a manufacturer is you sell something with the expectation of a certain lifetime of the product working, and then you're constantly fulfilling warranties because of a failure mode that could have been stopped earlier on or could have been controlled earlier on. So I think all of that as it relates to the IoT data, using that to improve the overall manufacturing process, and then the capability we keep coming back to around knowledge capture and trying to alleviate what Shashank was describing as the busiest person on the shop floor, and trying to enable others to understand what they do to help them out. All of that tied together was what really made me interested in Dovient, and I think, like you said, helped me kind of think back to my experience and understand the value of it. Hopefully that answered the question well, Varun.
It does. It does. Um, my experience on the shop floor is a little different. I haven't been on the shop floor a lot, but I did work on the supply chain quite a bit of my time. But it's mostly on the retail side of things, and also on more polished manufacturing floors, I would say. Uh, like working with the supply chain leaders and understanding that. But I do get this point a lot, like the maintenance manager issues a lot, in terms of, because they are the ones who break or make your supply chain work. That's most critical of any industry. The groundsmen are the true saviors of our industries. Harsha, I want to hear your perspective of when you started on the Dovient, along with when you were helping Shashank to build that out. What was your take? Why? How did uh, what kind of technology changes that you brought in to make it? Hey, this is what we've already seen, and this is why we need to do this way. What was your rationale over there?
Yeah, I think my experience like basically came from my experience in the previous companies, okay, working in manufacturing. And like I used to work with like fairly large manufacturing firms,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when we used to implement AI for them, what I realized is people don't even have a basic system of record in place, right? Like a lot of these people don't even have like an MES system. So on paper, there are billions and billions of valuations, but they don't have an MES system in place, or they don't have like a system for, let's say, they don't have standard operating procedures digitized. They don't have a lot of stuff. Like honestly, like I think uh, we um, we think that the more mature the organization is, the more digitized it is. But I think in manufacturing, it's the opposite. An organization that is less mature, that is just starting up, is generally more digitized than an organization that is obviously more matured, right? And and through this process, there is a lot of knowledge that gets lost, and that's the problem that we have been trying to solve even through Dovient, right? So how do you basically capture the knowledge, but not capturing the knowledge as some simple automation work, right? If you basically, I can put some RPA, IPA processes, capture this all, digitize the knowledge, digitize, do something, build some pipelines. It becomes very complex. If I have to do this, just implementing all of this might take 2 to 3 years in a plant, just to get all of this in place, right? So that my idea has always been that's where my idea has always been agentic, like because agentic AI is kind of breaking all of these barriers in some way, because it's directly giving intelligence to the user, right? User can, like in the simplest terms, I can basically just upload a file, I can upload a standard operating procedure and ask questions on it. I can basically to an agent can answer that, how do you do certain processes and things like that, right? But if you have something on a SharePoint, I don't need complex integrations. I just need a simple RAG on top of it, an agent on top of it that can do troubleshooting for you. You can basically bring a lot of data, whether it is structured, unstructured. You don't need to really think about, building a very complex schema on top of it and then start building things on top of it. Obviously, when you need accuracy, you will need all of this, but at least to get started and just to get start experimenting, agentic AI is kind of giving a lot of flexibility to test, experiment, and then kind of do things. And my idea was also when basically uh, when I got involved a bit with Dovient, essentially was the same. Basically, just that can we kind of bring in a mechanism where we make knowledge capturing and then obviously capturing knowledge and then decimating knowledge very very easy. It should not be like, it should not be a 2 years of integration work. It should just be like a 1 month of work that you do. Whatever you have in whatever form, whatever it is, you just dump it. You have agents that can make sense out of it and the agents that can basically help you out. So it might just take you a week or so to basically get you up and running. And I think that is something definitely a lot of these people are not doing today, right? Like uh, lot of the maintenance or whatever traditional maintenance management systems are not really doing at that, or at least they were not doing it a year and a half back at that, or they didn't have that thought process at that level at that time, right? And that's where I think I got interested in the way I got interested in Dovient, and that is what we brought very differently. It's this agentic thinking. And one thing is, when you think about agentic, you have to also reimagine a lot of your underlying system. Like systems like Dovient, they are not just systems of intelligence, right? They also have record. They also record information. They also basically record actions. They facilitate engagement through these workflows and all of that. So you can't basically just say that I will put a chatbot on top of it and everything will be done. But your entire fundamental system has to become headless. You have to have a lot of different, you have to think of it very differently. And to just make, I think Shashank can give more context, but just to make Dovient headless and be like natively agentic, that itself took like a 3-4 months of reconfiguring what was already developed. So it's a but it's a very innovative way of working. I feel like I feel like a lot of people are still not there. Like the way thinking of Dovient is still not there in a lot of these maintenance management systems. They still think of it as a knowledge bot on top of, or a chat bot on top of a system. That's it.
Right, right. Now, Sean, coming to you, you know, this is shop floor or any manufacturing company you take, that's the most uh, uh, friction. That's where you see most of the friction in it to change. They're like, nope, don't bring it to us. We're not the ones who want to start up, but they are the ones who are the pioneers of innovation too. Supply chain automation has happened there, warehouse automation has started with them, as the industrial revolution has started there. Now, how do you bring that change management to these people when it comes to AI or with intelligence products like Dovient or anything in the market for so far? What's your idea? And because that itself is a big game changer, getting them to use it. And now
Yeah,
now Harsha has called it out as a headless.
yeah.
You know,
No, I think I'll start just kind of. I wanted to add on to something Harsha said, and then I'll go into that. But I think Harsha made a really good point there that newer organizations are typically more digitized, whereas older, generational organizations that have been around for a very long time, which you see a lot in manufacturing, they've been operating since before the time of computers, and a lot of times I think the mantra for those types of organizations is if it's not broke, don't fix it, right?
Hmm.
So I think, from a technology adoption standpoint, it's going to be a lot more difficult to convince an organization that has been doing things, maybe when before the modern electrical grid was around, in terms of how they conducted their operations, right? But you make a good point too, Varun, around a lot of these organizations were pioneers, right? The Industrial Revolution is a perfect example of that. Now we're in, there was the digital revolution that occurred probably somewhere around the dawn of the internet or before, and then now we're in this, fourth revolution of artificial intelligence and digital twins, and quantum computing's right around the corner, right? So like all these different things are driving innovation. And I think, organizations like manufacturing may not have necessarily adopted that yet, or gone into that yet, because of a need basis, right? And I think a lot of the reasons why these innovations occurred in the first place before all this digitization was it came out of a need basis where they needed to increase output, so they put effort and R&D into making their processes better, or improving the machines, or if we want to go all the way back to the Model T, and Henry Ford, structuring things on an assembly line and doing manufacturing that way, instead of like how a Rolls Royce is still built today, where it's, all custom, one car at a time, instead of, doing all the parts and then assembling it later. So I think, how do you introduce something to someone who doesn't necessarily understand the problem they have, or maybe has a reluctance to change because the process isn't broke, so why fix it? I think there's really a couple of things that I think would help organizations kind of get over that hurdle. Is first, help them understand what is the value of something like this, or what is the problem it can potentially solve that they may have just accepted as status quo. Trying to find someone who can be a champion internally at that organization to push on and pull the different knobs and levers to help all the different constituents and stakeholders understand that this is how it could be. Like, this is what the future could like if we were able to put these things in place, and this is how it improves not only our operations, but the livelihood of our employees doing those operations. And I think if you can kind of sell that vision or that outcome, and help walk them down the path of how you get there. I know a lot of times we say, crawl, walk, run, of what are the things you can do now, what are the short-term goals, midterm goals, long-term goals to get to that end goal of that vision, and having someone internally within that org to support that and help connect the dots to navigate the organization and get all the different stakeholders in agreement and to sign off. I think that's really, how you would try to get something like this in place. And honestly, why it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, and probably a really long cycle in terms of an adoption of things like this, because it has an impact on everyone, and everyone has their own preconceived notions around how it could make it better, how it could make it worse, what is the actual desired outcome at the end, and what do we get along the way, even if we don't get all the way there. Is it still worth it to start down the path to get there at some point? I think,
Hmm.
if you can kind of speak to all those different levels, that's when things really get started.
Right.
I'll share some of the thoughts, to that question. So from what I experienced and what I heard from shop floor managers, right? So first and foremost is there is sunken cost fallacy. So our management has already invested in so and so company's tool. So we already paid huge amounts of dollars. So you're supposed to use it. So even though the technology that you're bringing onto the table makes sense, we already invested. So the sunken cost fallacy is always there at the management level. So that's honestly one of the thing where people may not welcome new technology. So and the other thing is, if you look at from the shop floor guys, so they are given a lot of tools already. So which haven't worked earlier. So these companies might have seen initiatives which failed,
Mhm.
right? So because the technology that they get, someone has to learn. So if there is a learning curve, naturally they may not find, the team members may not find enough time to learn the technology. So how many of you have seen a maintenance manager writing in his LinkedIn SAP certified?
None.
So someone, yeah, I mean, so people are writing. I mean, so someone is actually getting trying to use that tool. So someone is as putting. So it's the getting a new technology is sometimes an additional burden on the kind of things that they are already doing. So which is why they resist technology, right? And from Dovient, we try to address this point, this from the design itself. So when we were brainstorming, what we essentially thought is this is a tool that has to be that people shouldn't feel a burden, that it has to be fluid enough for the people to immediately adopt, use, and get ROI soon. So system of engagement is what we essentially worked on. So this is not going to be something, people had to fill a lot of forms, clunky forms, have huge workflow settings, again, hire functional consultants to get this tool set up. No. So we said, we decided that onboarding has to be very smooth. Some people has to be, even though people are not very tech savvy, they should be able to adopt this technology and use it in their local languages. So that's what we try to solve that problem.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think one of the really cool things about Dovient that was really smart on your part was the ability for someone working on the floor to just record a video of themselves doing something as it relates to a task. I think when I think about kind of that process or industry as it relates to how that typically transpires is, you have someone who's been doing it a while, maybe you have an apprentice or a new person and they shadow them for a while, and then they're expected to go off and do it themselves. But in terms of like what do you refer back to, what are their specific steps? You usually go back, you're flipping through the manual and you're trying to scratch your brain around like, how did we do this step again, how did we do that again? And I think having a video reference as well as those digitized manuals that you can ask questions of in natural language was a really really intelligent thing that Dovient does.
Yeah, shop floor adoption is also one of the trust factor is a huge problem. People don't trust systems if it goes wrong one time, and especially the manufacturing technicians, if they see something that is not working, so they immediately won't open it again probably.
Yeah,
So if you see machines, that are installed, so most of the OEMs provide some kind of dashboard, some kind of alerts on some port that they can open and look at. But if they don't work once, that's all. I mean,
yeah, false
the
positive would kill the
yeah,
adoption, right? Yeah.
right. So there is no feedback loop on these tools. So when we have feedback tools, a feedback loop, right? So where we take false positives and feedback into the system and give them a better system that improves, that self improves, naturally the adoption would flow in. So people will start trusting the system and eventually rely on it for their day to day work.
Yeah, and I think that's the ultimate goal, right? Is that full adoption where it becomes a critical part of how they do their job because they see it as a true enabler and not as a hindrance or bringing up that old trauma of other tools they tried to use and they got burned on. And yeah, I think that's really the kind of the crux of adoption and getting over that preconceived notion or that hump of, oh, this is just going to be like last time, right? And trying to show that this time it was more well thought out on the upfront side to try to avoid all of that and make it get better over time. So Varun, I know we've diverged a bit here, and I really appreciated your questions and the direction we went. I was curious, did you have any thoughts on digital twin?
Like I said, I want my own digital twin.
All right, that's it. Okay. All right,
Like
cool.
who doesn't want? Tell me, Sean. We are talking about uncertainty here, right? if I can mimic that, whatever is happening in the outside world, and see that to the digital twin, if I can reduce my uncertainty, why would I not want a digital twin? If we can replicate that to medical devices manufacturing companies, or any manufacturing company that they are producing the smallest to the biggest of things, it's a huge win, right? Like even for software, if we, let's say if you're designing a product, like for example, for areas that we are doing, right, I created a digital twin of how the architecture is designed, not just a workflow diagram, it's about how each feature and each component is tied together, and what happens. I was able to test the load itself on that digital twin by kind of, I built that digital twin using clouds and clouds of the world. So who doesn't want that? Like if I can replicate myself doing multiple things, I would be on the golf course.
Yeah, automate your whole life, right? So you can
Yeah,
go
yeah,
go do what's fun.
yeah.
Uh, so to that end, I guess Shashank, have you seen a lot of requests to incorporate a lot of what you all have built, which seems like the precursor to making a digital unit to then kind of integrate with a digital twin platform or evolve Dovient to have more of a visualized component acting as a digital twin? I'm curious your thought on like the roadmap, I guess, on that as it relates to Dovient.
Definitely. The manufacturing, strategy teams. So all of the manufacturing strategy teams I met know about digital twin. They speak digital twin, and they also would like to have a digital twin. But to be realistic, for a digital twin to make meaning, so they should have good data on their shop floor, so where they can feed into the system and see some signals on the virtual platform what they've replicated, right? And that's where even Dovin platform is heading to. So we are building plant models. So we call it plant model, just like how NVIDIA built the world model. So plant models would actually replicate your plant, not just a mission. We're not speaking about digital twin of a production line or a process. We are speaking about the entire plant. So we would be able to replicate the entire plant into a digital twin by understanding its layout, by understanding its um, the main process, the crux of the process, suppliers, the geography, the environmental factors, what varies, and which data points or which KPIs are important to the management. So we would replicate that into a plant and would be able to deliver to any organization that is interested in having such digital twin um, in their plant.
Yeah, because I mean, when I now that I'm thinking about it, when I'm looking at Dovient, I'm seeing a lot of the prerequisites to what you're describing kind of already being captured, right? You have, the by plant view, machines by plant view, IoT data by machines, the knowledge graph that Harsha described last time of how these things interrelate with each other, digitizing and making all the SOPs available. So it seems like a lot of the prerequisites are starting to fall into place as it relates to what's, like you said, you need to have good data first, and I think that's what Dovient's doing. So yeah, really excited for the future of what all that transpires to, and that digital kind of whole plan or whole model that you were describing. I think that's a really interesting outcome of where Dovient goes, and how people can use it long term. So I know we're getting towards kind of an hour of time here on the podcast, and I think the nature of our roundtable questions was probably better than the ones I had pre-canned, anyways. So I just wanted to maybe go to a final sign-off question for each person. And Harsha, we haven't heard from you in a while, so I'll start with you, and then we'll hit the rest of the team. But what's one technical capability, Harsha, you think separates manufacturers who pull ahead from ones who kind of stay stuck in the past? What's the biggest one to you?
Uh, One technical capability, I think I don't like. There's not one shot. There are so many. I think, but I would say at least, like Shashank was telling, no, if you get visibility into what is happening in your plant real time, that itself is a very big capability. I feel uh, that will kind of pull you ahead as a manufacturer, because there is this concept in manufacturing called short interval controls, basically short interval control, where you can control. Generally what happens is you control the manufacturing plant by shift. You plan for a shift, then you basically take, the shift goes, if it goes bad it will go bad, if it goes good it will go good. You don't know what will happen, but then whatever adjustment you will do at the end of the shift. But if you are able to control shift at an hourly level, or at an interval of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or an hourly level, that will be like a very big win, because you can be able to control what you're producing. You can maximize your throughput at a very granular level. So, and that requires a lot of data to be coming through. And in some way, you need to know what is happening in your plant at any given point in time, at a very granular level.
No, I think that was great, and I think it segues well into my next question for Shashank, because I think what you're describing, like data visibility, and you're saying build that foundation, right? Get all of that information as it relates to data of your operations in place first, which to me is kind of the thing you need to do to really make AI useful on top of it. And so Shashank, I'm curious, over the next 3 years, what is your prediction, or like what do you think is going to happen in manufacturing with AI?
Yeah. So coming to the data itself, so now what AI is able to do is AI is able to understand unstructured data. So what is the revolution that we are seeing today is because of that single fact that we could make meaning out of sequential strings, so sequential text, and that data, right? So, so I think with this, the decision making power of manufacturing companies would vary a lot. So they would get a lot of power in managing that uncertainty we have been speaking about, and make a lot of meaning with this. Um, this what you call, sorry, I'm getting a little distracted. Yeah.
It's okay.
So yeah. So manufacturing companies with 3 years from now, people are speaking about, one is dark factories. So which, may not happen. Honestly, three years is a very short time. So it's more a long origin. But what I think these manufacturing companies will become is being very efficient, and increase their throughput, becoming much more leaner than what they are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So Varun, question for you, and feel free to spin it how you'd like, but the idea is, what does a well-run manufacturing business actually look like when they get the intelligence layer right? Curious your perspective.
Uh, I don't know, man. Well run means you got to look at your 360 degrees of running a business, and I don't think there is a 360 degree of everything running in coherence, right? There'll be some or the other, like I said, the trade-offs that you make in your business, how conservative you are, how risky you are, all and how much of a bet that you can make against your decisions. That's what is there are too many moving parts to it. Now the best one that's actually works is, stick to the basics. What is that you do really good at? Now what are the decisions that instead of looking at AI as a, like some magical pill, use it in your workflows to better the way that you're already doing, or like, call it operational efficiency, or more throughput, or more faster way of doing things. That's what a well-rounded manufacturing firm. But if you can rethink the way you're operating at 10, 15, 50 years ago and to now, this is the time.
So you're
That
saying get started.
Yeah, of course, like
Yeah, right.
everything.
So there is, so sorry. Yeah, please go ahead.
No, this is like, this is the time to move forward, and this is the right time to make that changes happen. Just like every industrial revolutions, 4.0s or the 5.0s of the world. So this is another way of, not just for manufacturing industry alone. Like, so whether you take a basic retail operations, or whether you take a healthcare supply chain, or anything for that matter, right? the way of working is going to change. The way of actually what we're supposed to do is going to happen more. Like as a maintenance manager running through the shop floor, then what he's supposed to do will happen right now with the AI in place, and that's what has to happen. That is where I am placing all my bets on, and those are the companies that get successful also.
Sounds like you got a high tolerance level.
I do.
Sorry, Shashank, did you want to add something to what Varun was saying?
No, nothing. I mean, he's right. So there is a paradigm shift that is happening in careers, the way people learn, the way people work, the way people apply knowledge. So a lot of things are changing, and manufacturing companies are it's an area which is very competitive. So you have to adapt to the trends, or you'll definitely fall behind. So when you ask the question about 3 years, so if you don't adapt, with this paradigm shift, how people are working and how you fine tune your organization, how you steer your organization to fit in that paradigm shift, so you would lose behind. So it's the time to act. It's the time to take initiatives. It's the time to, you know, take that step you always wanted to do since maybe past 20 years.
Yeah, no, thank you, Shashank, for the insights and for joining us for 2 episodes. I really appreciate all the background and experience you provided to these conversations. It's been really great having you on. I think we're going to miss you as we move into our next episode arc. And Harsha, as always, appreciate the context you provide from a systems lens. And Varun, today I liked how you started to steer the conversation a little bit differently on the roundtable portion. You saved me from having to talk so much on that piece, and I think we got a lot better insights from it from the rest of the team. So I thought this was a great episode. Thank you everyone for joining. Just to kind of summarize, I think Shashank said it really well in the intro, right? A lot of these things happen first at the production planning level. You got a plan, you got a backup plan, you got a backup plan for the backup plan. When you get the digitization right, and you have better signals to limit your downtime, do predictive maintenance, you can stick to the plan usually better, and maybe not have to go to the backup of the backup. And then ultimately, I think, Varun, as you said, the decisions that are made, maybe it'll never be perfect in terms of your level of visibility or the data, because everything's dynamic and agile. But ultimately, you got to determine what your level of risk tolerance is, and what is going to be the reason why you make the decisions you do based on the level of information you have. And appreciated everyone's insights here at the end around kind of where this space is going. And it's never been a better time to get started. Shashank, you said it well, right? AI does really well with unstructured data, so now we can start to get a wrangle on all of this stuff. So
That's right.
next episode, we're going to get off the factory floor and into digital infrastructure, which is kind of the thing that quietly runs behind the scenes of everything. So next time is going to be episode 6, API security with Aries. A little bit of a different environment, different way things break, but similar in terms of the same problem we've been circling all session. Systems are complicated, something fails, maybe it breaks, no one notices, and by the time someone finds out, it's too late, or it's expensive problem. So we're going to start looking at this more on the microservices side of a similar lens of what we talked about today. We'll talk about API validation, anomaly detection, and what that actually looks like when you catch the problem before it turns into an incident. So if anyone listening has a role in engineering, security, or DevOps at any kind of scale, I think it's going to be a really good episode. Thank you everyone again for joining who's on the episode today, and thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. Appreciate you all. This has been AI After Hours presented by AZTRA.
Right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
folks.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks
Take care,
everyone.
everyone. Bye.
Yeah.